There have been some pretty serious allegations made by India's ruling party, the BJP, against its main opposition, the Congress. The most concerning one being that the main opposition party of India has been working hand in glove with the American deep state and other non-state actors to destabilize India. So today we're going to talk about these allegations, particularly the deep state's role in it. But first, let's try to understand what this deep state is. Deep state sounds like a state which started extensively quoting Paulo Coelho after reading like half a book by the guy. But it's not that kind of deep. It's a bit more sinister than that.
The deep state is largely undefined. The political Rorschach is highly subjective. Now it pops up regularly in stories about routine government business. Just recently, the president accused his own Justice Department of being part of the deep state.
And we wanted to take a closer look at the term deep state. It's bandied around Donald Trump.
Are deep state actors meddling in India?
The deep state refers to these unelected bureaucrats, lobbyists, and other elite institutions like big business interests working behind the scenes to manipulate governments and influence nations. The deep state doesn't particularly care about who's in power because the deep state is the power. It is alleged that this deep state has been instrumental in various regime change operations that the American government has been involved in over the years. Now, according to the BJP, that deep state regime change operation has now come to India.
We are going to talk about this dangerous triangle which is trying to destabilize India.
India's ruling Bharatiya Janata Party has alleged that elements within the US State Department and the deep state are conspiring with investigative journalists and Indian opposition leader Rahul Gandhi to destabilize the country.
Why is the American deep state targeting India, especially when this shadowy network has faced criticism even within the United States?
Now, the Bharatiya Janata Party that heads India's ruling coalition is directly accusing the US State Department of trying to destabilize India. It's also claimed that the US deep state is working to target Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
ये विपक्षी पार्टियों का काम है कि इनको केवल सरकार को कैसे डिरेल करना है उसके लिए अलग-अलग तरह के मंसूबे ये पालते रहते हैं.
And the BJP has painted the villain in this drama to be Congress and Rahul Gandhi as the poster boy for this global anti-India agenda. Now, this is a very serious allegation because it means that India's primary opposition party is in bed with the non-state actors as well as foreign governments that are openly inimical to India's interests. And it's not just Modi and the BJP that they're targeting, it's basically India's sovereignty. While many people dismiss the deep state as a conspiracy theory,
when you hear the term deep state, what image does it conjure up? Is it a secret Illuminati that controls everything around us?
As to whether there's a deep state, they're not smart enough to be a deep state. If there were a deep state, we wouldn't be here having this debate, I can tell you. There are a lot of good people out there trying to do the right thing, but the idea that we're run by a deep state is deeply paranoid.
The evidence suggests that the deep state in various forms operates in pretty much every major country. You can think of the deep state as the scene from The Dark Knight Rises where the businessman who believes that he's in charge is barking orders at Bane, while Bane turns around and says to him,
"No, you stay here. I'm in charge."
Do you feel in charge?
Imagine Bane being the deep state and the businessman being the party in power. It is believed that the term deep state originated in Turkey where it was called the Derin Devlet. It emerged to describe a network operating within the state comprising of bureaucrats, academics, journalists and politicians, big business interests, all working together to maintain their political and economic advantages.
Most Americans hadn't heard the term deep state before Donald Trump's 2016 campaign. Now it pops up regularly in stories about routine government business. Just recently, the president accused his own Justice Department of being part of the deep state. The tricky thing is the deep state is largely undefined. The political Rorschach is highly subjective, truly living in the eye of the beholder. The term typically refers to an intra-government conspiracy. HuffPost puts it this way: deep state implies a unified force deeply embedded in the republic that has its own agenda and the means to undermine the decisions of elected presidents and members of Congress. Its power derives from the control of the mechanisms of power and being invisible. Synonym: shadow government.
These unelected powers have their hands in every cookie jar, from military engagement to economic policies, ensuring that the status quo that benefits them remains intact. In fact, the concept of the deep state was explained very well in the popular 80s British comedy Yes Minister, where a career bureaucrat explains to another why the deep state, which he called the right people.
If the right people don't have power, do you know what happens? The wrong people get it. politicians, councillors, ordinary voters.
But aren't they supposed to in a democracy?
This is a British democracy, Bill. How do you mean? British democracy recognizes that you need a system to protect the important things of life and keep them out of the hands of the barbarians.
Historian Ryan Gingeras, an expert on Turkish history and politics, describes the deep state as a kind of state within a state where unelected officials, technocrats, and institutions influence or outright control public policy, often in ways that undermine democratic processes. And that's why you'll often hear Trump, the new incoming American president, railing against the deep state.
We are finally putting America first. Yet the deep state and the failed ruling class are trying to resist any changes to their failed policies of the past. They believe it is their right to rule over you and to redistribute your wealth all around the world. No, thank you.
And so it is believed that while governments may change, the deep state remains, much like herpes. Not that I would know anything about that. Let's move on. Which is why when it comes to American foreign policy, it is believed that it doesn't really matter which party is in charge, but the foreign policy has remained fairly consistent because of the deep state, whether it's the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan under the Republican regime and the regime change in Libya, Bangladesh, and potentially even Syria right now under the Democratic regime.
An example here is Pakistan. The country's intelligence agency and the military often operate independently of the country's elected leaders. Coups have been the result. Back here in the US,
in the United States, for example, the first inklings about the problems of the deep state can be traced back to President Dwight Eisenhower warning about the growing influence of the military-industrial complex in 1961. He feared that defense contractors, intelligence agencies, and military elites are trying to consolidate their power, overshadowing democratic governance. Over time, the deep state in America has become an undeniable force, operating through institutions like the CIA and the Pentagon. The CIA is often regarded as the deep state's operational arm and has been instrumental in shaping global politics. In 1953, the agency orchestrated Operation Ajax in Iran, overthrowing the democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. Mossadegh's crime? Nationalizing Iran's oil industry, which would threaten the interests of Western corporations. A similar playbook unfolded in Guatemala in 1954, where the CIA launched a coup to remove President Jacobo Arbenz, whose land reforms challenged Western corporate profits. This operation plunged Guatemala into decades of civil war marked by widespread violence and instability. The same playbook was used in Nicaragua in the 1980s, where the CIA backed the overthrow of President Salvador Allende, whose socialist policies were deemed a threat to US economic interests. And then in recent decades, we've seen what happened in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Bangladesh, and now potentially Syria. It's like an addiction, man. You know, normal people are addicted to things like pills or cocaine or hentai. Why can't you pick something like that? Because your addiction has killed I don't know how many millions of people around the world by now. In Europe, it is also alleged that unelected officials in Brussels often dictate policies that impact millions, bypassing national governments, which is one of the main reasons why Brexit happened. But while the deep state often operates beyond public accountability, it doesn't always work alone. It has been known to collaborate with NGOs, intellectuals, media, and other foreign entities to destabilize governments. This pattern has been repeated across the globe. In the case of Iraq, prominent media organizations and NGOs supported the US government's bogus claim that Iraq was stockpiling weapons of mass destruction, which played a key role in changing the American public opinion in favor of the invasion of Iraq. Studio's heated up a little bit now. We can get rid of that. You can take Ukraine, for example, in 2014. Leaked communications suggested that US officials worked closely with NGOs to support opposition groups and amplify protests against the pro-Russian government of President Viktor Yanukovych. These NGOs played a critical role in framing the uprising as a grassroots democratic movement and not something supported and funded by the CIA. The US spent $5 billion to overthrow Viktor Yanukovych. This is something that is accepted by Victoria Nuland, former US Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs. And so clearly the deep state in America has a devastating track record of regime change, undermining the mandate of the people in various countries and throwing those countries into utter chaos for their own personal goals, which is why the allegations by the BJP towards the primary opposition leader Rahul Gandhi working with the deep state needs to be taken extremely seriously. Super duper ethereal. You've seen that for the past 4 years, Congress has been throwing the kitchen sink at the BJP, throwing every issue at the wall and seeing what sticks. Pegasus spyware, Adani controversies, caste census, global hunger rankings, press freedom, you name it, they've got it. BJP alleges that a lot of these talking points seem to come with a made in abroad tag. One of the many non-state actors that the deep state is alleged to be collaborating with in order to destabilize India, according to the BJP, is billionaire George Soros and his Open Society Foundation. George Soros is a famous philanthropist who is famous, or infamous rather, for funding organizations that will usher democracy in various countries. He's of a Jewish background, but according to his own admission, he's someone who during the Second World War actually was helping the Nazis locate and confiscate Jewish properties. In 2020, Soros announced a $1 billion commitment to start a global university, the goal of which is to combat nationalist governments and climate change. Soros called these two issues the twin challenges threatening civilization, and specifically singled out India and the BJP government. He told Cambridge University that India's democracy is on life support and casually hinted at foreign intervention. Remember these statements by Mr. Soros, because as we talk about the allegations of the BJP in this video, Mr. Soros' statements will start to ring louder and louder in your head. The BJP alleges that the Pegasus spyware scandal, which Congress used to paint the BJP and the Indian government as big brother, the so-called evidence for this came from a Europe-based investigative group called OCCRP, or the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. The BJP referred to a report by the French media house Mediapart about OCCRP. The report revealed that although OCCRP claims to be an independent organization and a neutral organization, it is actually funded by US government agencies. The BJP explained that OCCRP works to serve the interests of foreign governments with a special focus on India. OCCRP also has connections with controversial figures and groups like George Soros and his Open Society Foundation. OCCRP also allegedly receives funding from other deep state related organizations like the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation. According to Mediapart, OCCRP has received significant funding from various sources. $47 million from the US government, $14 million from European countries like Britain, Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, Slovakia, and France. And between 2014 and 2023, government funding made up about 70% of OCCRP's annual budget, with 52% coming from the US government alone. Since 2023, OCCRP has been laser focused on India and Adani, trying to connect Adani's business ventures to the BJP government. The BJP has also alleged that Rahul Gandhi has developed a relationship with the American deep state. Remember, Rahul Gandhi of India is a union of states, not a nation fame. Rahul Gandhi famous for calling Hindu extremism the biggest threat to India. Rahul Gandhi famous for these gems.
Well, in India there are two philosophies. One that says that you never die, and the other that says you were never born.
ऐसी मशीन लगाऊंगा, इस साइड से आलू घुसेगा, उस साइड से सोना निकलेगा। अशोक गहलोत जी ने यहाँ पे कुंभकर्ण लिफ्ट योजना का पैसा दिया था। कुंभकर्ण लिफ्ट योजना का पैसा दिया था। कोका कोला कंपनी को शुरू करने वाला एक शिकंजी बेचने वाला व्यक्ति था। वो अमेरिका में शिकंजी बेचता था। मैकडॉनल्ड्स कंपनी का नाम सुना, सब जगह दिखती है मैकडॉनल्ड्स कंपनी। इसको चालू किसने किया, क्या करता था वो, कोई बता सकता है मुझे? ढाबा चलाता था। हिंदुस्तान में वो ढाबा वाला दिखा दो, वो ढाबा वाला दिखा दो जिसने कोका कोला कंपनी बनाई हुई। प्रधानमंत्री जी बाहर नहीं जाते हैं, नहीं बाहर जाते मतलब अब्रॉड जाते हैं। प्रधानमंत्री अपनी आंख मेरे आंख में नहीं डाल सकते हैं। सच्चाई है।
The BJP talked about Rahul Gandhi's secret rendezvous in Uzbekistan, where he allegedly met with Samantha Power, head of USAID, the same group that funds OCCRP. Rahul Gandhi routinely travels to the United States, where he meets anti-India politicians like Ilhan Omar.
Controversy now that's brewing around Rahul Gandhi posing in a picture with India Beta. Pakistan sympathizer Ilhan Omar.
He was seen posing for a picture with India Beta and Pakistan sympathizer Ilhan Omar,
who called for an independent Kashmir and condemned India over the abrogation of Article 370, the Citizenship Amendment Act, the farmers' protests, as well as the alleged killing of Khalistani Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Rahul Gandhi in America has also met with people and organizations that have alleged links with the Pakistani ISI and the Pakistani Jamaat-e-Islami, which is a designated terrorist organization. And it doesn't stop there. During an event in Washington, Rahul Gandhi reportedly endorsed the Khalistani referendum campaign by Sikhs for Justice. Their co-founder, Khalistani Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, actually praised Rahul Gandhi's statements, saying that they were aligned with SFJ's vision. During the same trip, he also met Jeremy Corbyn, the former British Labour Party leader.
BJP tweets a picture of Rahul Gandhi with Jeremy Corbyn. who is infamous for his anti-Hindu as well as anti-India stand.
Rahul Gandhi now landing himself in a fresh controversy as the BJP now questioning Rahul Gandhi's meeting with Jeremy Corbyn.
Corbyn isn't exactly India's biggest fan. He's been vocal about an independent Kashmir, about so-called human rights in India, against the Citizenship Amendment Act, in favor of the farmers' protests. And the deep state connection doesn't only extend to Rahul Gandhi, they allegedly also extend to his mother, Sonia Gandhi. She's the co-president of the FDLAP, the Forum for Democratic Leaders in the Asia Pacific. She's allegedly linked to an organization that is financed by Soros' foundation. This foundation that she's the president of has expressed views treating Kashmir as a separate entity from India. So again, one of the top leaders of the opposition is the president of an organization that expressed views treating Kashmir as a separate entity from India. But wait, there's more. Salil Shetty, the vice president of Soros-funded Open Society Foundation, is also very good friends with the Gandhi family. He was spotted during the Bharat Jodo Yatra walking alongside Rahul Gandhi. He was also part of the farmers' protests as well as the Anti-Citizenship Amendment Act protests. I mean, it's hard to ignore the George Soros allegations when you're literally walking hand in hand with his right-hand guy. You can't just say, I'm not racist, while having Adolf Hitler's picture as your profile picture and the Confederate flag tattooed on your butt cheeks. Let's shift gears to the Adani saga as well. Rahul Gandhi has been very, very vocal about Adani. But here's where things get interesting. His press conferences on Adani was live streamed by none other than the OCCRP. According to the BJP, this is not a coincidence. They claim that it's part of a coordinated effort to tarnish Adani's image and by extension link that to the BJP government and weaken Prime Minister Modi. In fact, both Soros and Rahul have allegedly publicly suggested that the Adani issue could topple the Modi government. It's ironic because the Congress government has actually joined hands with Adani himself in Telangana, a state which they control, which gave us this absolutely classic clip.
सर अक्सर आप लोग मोदी सरकार और अडानी को लेकर सवाल उठाते रहे हैं और आपका बड़ा मुद्दा भी रहा है, लेकिन अभी हाल ही में आपकी तेलंगाना सरकार ने एक बड़ा MOU साइन किया है अडानी के साथ, उस पर अगर आप कुछ कहना चाहें।
मुझे लगता है कि ये मैनिफेस्टो लॉन्च की प्रेस वार्ता है और हम इसी पर केंद्रित रखना चाहते हैं। ये सवाल आप अन्यथा
In fact, in Telangana, parties that are in opposition to the Congress wore the same Adani shirts to attack Rahul Gandhi that he wore to attack the BJP. In fact, the TRS workers that were wearing these Adani shirts to attack Rahul Gandhi were blocked from entering the parliament when Congress saw them wearing that t-shirt. Honestly, you had one job, Rahul Gandhi. You were laser focused on using Adani as a villain to attack Modi. All you had to do is not work with Adani yourself, but you couldn't even do that. I'm not sure what good deeds Prime Minister Modi has done to have Rahul Gandhi in opposition throughout his career, but in his previous life, he must have been instrumental in creating the polio vaccine or something. The man has accumulated some insanely good karma. It's not the first time that Congress, which usually attacks billionaires, has ties with billionaires themselves. The Congress party has maintained relationships with prominent industrialists like the Bajaj family. Industrial Rahul Bajaj, for instance, had interactions with Congress leaders and was known for his candid discussions with Congress on economic policies.
Now we're in the process of opening up. How do you think about your supply chain as we open up? When does your supply chain actually start to function at a reasonable level?
I would disagree actually with the question in the sense आप कह रहे हो कि we are opening up, पर मुझे तो लगता नहीं है कि we are opening up.
In Maharashtra, the Shiv Sena of Uddhav Thackeray has close relations with the Ambani family, which is why over the last year, the opposition has been attacking the BJP with the Ambani-Adani friendship label. But the name Ambani curiously disappeared during the Maharashtra elections, and only the name Adani was used when attacking the BJP in Maharashtra. Other deep state actors that are involved in destabilizing India are government-funded organizations like the USCIRF or the United States Council on International Religious Freedom. They release an annual report or the annual tradition where they rank countries on religious freedom with all the nuance of a Yelp reviewer with a power fantasy.
Federal US Commission has done it again and has urged the Biden administration to impose targeted sanctions on the Indian government agencies and officials responsible for what it calls as severe violations of religious freedom in the country by freezing their assets.
From state-sponsored discrimination to imprisonment, sometimes even death, religious persecution is on the rise.
According to the USCIRF, India is apparently a country of particular concern when it comes to religious freedom, which is interesting because the USCIRF itself is populated with right-wing evangelical Christians who have been instrumental in opposing gay marriage, imposing religious fundamentalism in American government, and now vehemently opposing a woman's right to choose. In fact, the same evangelical Christians have been instrumental in opposing abortion access for women, which has now led to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which essentially has led to the removal of federal abortion protection for women. These are the people lecturing India on religious tolerance. It's like Ori telling you that you have attention-seeking issues, or Tiger Shroff telling you that your acting is not very good. You also have democracy indices like Freedom House report, which downgraded India's status from a free democracy to a partly free democracy, citing media suppression and democratic decline under Modi. Again, it will not surprise you to know that Freedom House is also funded by the American government. There are also NGOs that the deep state often works with to destabilize other countries. Take the CHRI, funded by the Open Society Foundation and the Ford Foundation. Their mission: justice, reform, freedom of expression, and grassroots mobilization. Sounds noble until you realize they received 50 crore in funding, with 12 crores coming directly from Soros' team. Then there's the National Foundation for India, which collected 58.1 crore between 2015 and 2022. Notable donors: Soros' foundation, the Omidyar Network, and the Ford Foundation. Center for Policy Research, a major think tank, had its license revoked this year. Before that, it received 25 crores in direct funding in 2019-20, including 11.6 crores from the Ford Foundation for studying urban research networks. A lot of these groups have been allegedly linked to sponsoring media outlets critical of the Indian government, backing protests that conveniently align with foreign narratives, like protests against the abrogation of Article 370, protests against the CAA, and propaganda in favor of the farmers' protests. Another example is Teesta Setalvad's NGO Sabrang, which got 290,000 rupees from the Ford Foundation between 2004 and 2006. The result: decades of activism aimed squarely at removing any blame from the Muslim community for the Godhra incident and painting Modi as a murderer, despite him getting a clean chit from various special investigative teams as well as the Indian Supreme Court for his so-called role in the Gujarat riots. These NGOs work directly against India's national interests, like Medha Patkar and her NGO that campaigned against the Narmada Dam, as well as the protests against the Kundakulam nuclear plant. So what's the end game here? According to the BJP, the end game is to teach India a lesson, or potentially even overthrow the democratically elected Indian government. India under Modi has followed a more independent foreign policy. Despite Modi being a very pro-Western prime minister, his closeness to Russia, even after the Russia-Ukraine war, has really kicked the deep state into overdrive. The deep state is not a fan of countries that follow independent foreign policies, that look after their interests instead of the interests of the deep state. Which is why just recently we saw a brutal regime change operation in Bangladesh.
Today we're pulling back the curtain on a sinister plot to oust Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, an orchestrated move by the United States, not just to destabilize a government, but to balance out India's growing influence. This is no conspiracy theory.
So what can India do about this? Well, one big thing is to enhance transparency in NGO funding. Foreign-funded NGOs play a significant role in creating these agenda. India needs robust laws to regulate NGO funding, ensuring transparency about where their money is coming from and how it's being spent. If an NGO's funding sources align suspiciously with anti-Indian narratives and anti-India forces, it should face stricter scrutiny under the Foreign Contributions Regulations Act, or the FCRA. India needs to establish its own media watchdog as well as its own state-owned media networks like the BBC that focus on countering misinformation and providing India's perspective to the rest of the world. A nationwide campaign is needed to educate citizens about how this propaganda works, who funds it, and why it's important to question it. Think of it as a vaccine against the misinformation spread by the deep state. And India must proactively build alliances with like-minded countries that are also targeted by foreign narratives and deep state-style operations, collaborating with nations like Japan, Israel, Russia, countries in the Middle East, and certain EU members could help share intelligence and strategies to counteract such influences globally. But I want to ask you, how much credence do you give these allegations by the BJP? Do you think the deep state's influence in India is very strong? Do you think the opposition is compromised by the deep state? And I want to know what you think is a good solution towards India fighting back against it. Let me know your thoughts and comments in the comment section down below. Again, guys, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our Patreon and subscribe to our YouTube membership. We're going to be providing a lot more content and interesting tidbits for our members. Other than that, I will see you for the next episode. And until then, stay happy, stay healthy. I will see you for the next episode. And to all of you, a secular pranam.